So I go into Makueni. And because that time I was working with President Kibaki, a mentor, somebody I really loved. So he was a father. So I tell him that now I want to be governor. Actually, President Uhuru had wanted me to be a CS. Somebody was sent to me, to ask whether I wanted that, but I said already I had committed to being a governor. Now,
how was President Kibaki's reaction when you told him you want to be the governor?
He supported.
That's
he
nice.
supported, and even when we had a trip in going some places in Makueni as we campaigned, he said that for me and also Alfred Mutua, he said that we would help the people if we were chosen. So he was very generous. He was very generous.
Welcome to ABTV Kenya. I'm your host Asha Bashir. Today I'm privileged, honored to have Professor Kivutha Kibwana. He will share his life journey and insights. I hope you learn a lot from this video because I look forward to also learning. Thank you very much, Professor.
Asante.
Professor, perhaps we can start. Who is Professor Kivutha Kibwana?
Well, I don't know whether one is qualified to really talk a lot about themselves to say what they are, because you never know yourself completely or a lot. But basically, in June, I'm going to be 70 years old. So those are many years. I will have worked for 45 years in the public service. That is from 1977 up to 2022. Basically, as a teacher, somebody who worked in civil society, worked as a politician, member of parliament, assistant minister, in office of the president, in office of the vice president, minister in environment and natural resources and lands. For a while, I was minister in 2 ministries for 17 months. Then worked as a governor, a lawyer by profession, but also with an interest in theology, because apart from legal training, I also had training in theology. I like to write creatively as well as to write in law. Somebody from a rural background, from Makueni, where I went to school and went to, after primary school in Makueni, went to Machako School, University of Nairobi, University of London, University Harvard University, Harvard Law School, and George Washington University. And after 2022, I have now decided that it is time to, take a rest and enjoy family and, maybe write creatively as well as write legal things that I didn't. Maybe I will be an adjunct professor. That's something that I'm thinking about. But basically, I didn't say that also I was involved in the Kenya's pro-democracy movement in the 90s, especially the 90s. And at some point, I was the chairperson of the pro-democracy reform movement. So that's me. Of course, married to Nazi, 4 kids, 7 grandchildren. and hoping that I will have more. We shall have more.
Thank you so much, Mheshimiwa. You have spoken so much about your achievement in the last couple of years, but how was your childhood growing up in Makueni? You said you've been more of a rural person.
Yes.
How was it growing up in the rural setup?
I had to go to school away from my parents, primary school that is, because when I started school, where I went to school, we had only standard 1 and standard 2. And because those days, there wasn't a lot of primary schools everywhere. So after standard 2, if you didn't leave to go somewhere else, you went back to standard 1. And I remember we had one teacher who taught both classes. And one class was facing one side and the other class another side. And sometimes he would go, he also used to drink, I think, and he would go to do so and then leave a radio. Those radios where you put the radio in a box and you lock. So he would leave also the radio to be like a substitute teacher. And we would listen, and then when we thought it was time to go home, we would go home. So after standard 2, my parents decided that I was going to go and study in another school. And unfortunately, and fortunately maybe, I went to stay with my aunt who was a widow. And there was a lot of challenge in terms of food. She was actually quite poor. Because I remember, usually she counted coins. I don't remember counting, paper money. And even when it came to like having meat, when she went to a Mali market, she would come back with bones. And we didn't quite know whether she had just been given the bones or she had bought them. And that would be meat for us. And we, like when a goat or a sheep died in the village, as children, we were very happy. Because we said to ourselves, now we are going to have real meat. So there was a lot of poverty. But even at that early age, I realized that education was important. And so I didn't complain, to my, parents. We persevered. And I remember even when we went to school, primary school, there were kids whose parents were, rich. They brought good food to school for lunch. And we used to eat together like, about 5 kids together, something we called a kesuka. And so I was admitted to one of those where the kids, would bring sometimes rice, even chapati, and even meat. But after a while, because I would bring, maize and beans, sometimes even just boiled maize. So they kicked me out. They said that, you can't continue eating with us because you are not bringing real food. And I remember, that day, I really cried and prayed to God and said, I want to do well in school so that I can become a teacher, because those days, the teacher was like the mentor, the person you looked up to. That was like a very prestigious job. So I want to become a teacher. After standard 7, I go to teachers college. I become a teacher because I looked, my teachers, like one of them is still alive, Kemweli, who was a person with disability. I really admired him and the headmaster. So I said to God, as a small, boy, I just want to study and become a teacher so that I have food. I can eat and, I will not be molested by hunger. And that actually was one of my driving forces in terms of going to school, just to eat and fill my stomach and not, have this challenge of, And that's how, I did reasonably well. And then, came to Machakos school, where I stayed for 6 years, from 1 to 6. And I remember in that rural setting, sometimes we say there isn't education in the rural setting, apart from the formal education like the primary school which I went to, and the secondary school subsequently, and university and so on. But we would help our parents or in the relatives where now I was going to school. We would help them in terms of if it is in the farm, if it was going to fetch water, going to do all those things. So as a young person, you begin to know how to do agriculture. During the evenings, particularly on Friday and Saturday evening, we would be treated to oral, stories, folk stories by the senior members. And after we have played, hide and seek, and we have done all those things children do, then we would be treated to those stories where you are told there's the hyena, and there is the fox, and one is very clever, the other one is very greedy, and so on. And when I think later about whom I grew into, those stories became very, very important, because you learned some morality, some ethics from them, and it's only later when you reflect on what happened, then you say to yourself, oh, okay, there was that traditional education, and I really learned a lot. And even in later life, this idea of you listen to people, you don't minimize them, don't think that they don't know much, they have no knowledge. I think that is something that I picked from that. So generally, I didn't stay a lot, because with my parents, because after standard 7, now going to secondary school for 6 years. So it means that you go home during holidays. And so that there was a bit of missing that element of consistent relationship with parents and siblings.
Then you transition now to the university.
Yes.
There's something which more you've picked up, and perhaps with the younger generation and viewers nowadays. Now you're raising grandchildren, like you said, and perhaps even your children. Looking back, the stories, the folk stories, you said played an instrumental role. With now the digital aspect and parents not having time, and the society is not like before, where now children are molded, because from those stories, like you say, there's a moral of the story, you're molded into that holistic being. How do you see best that now the current generation can crop up with now the dynamics and the changes, so that such a good culture can also be imparted to generations going forward?
I think, unfortunately, particularly children who are being raised in urban areas, when they go back to the rural areas where maybe their grandparents are or other senior relatives, there isn't enough time for that kind of interaction. And even some of the older people don't know those stories. So there's more reliance on stories that are being written for young adults, for children. And I think we need to invest a lot more in that reading culture, where young people, children and young people will be encouraged to read, and there will be appropriate stories, because even the Kenya Institute of Curriculum Development is doing a lot of that, so that there is this culture. Like I have a friend who went to Arusha, and what was he going to do? We talked with him today. He had a holiday, a reading holiday. So he just decided that for 2 weeks he's going away. He has books which he hasn't, read, he has bought, he hasn't read, and he just wants to devote his time to reading them. So I think that reading culture is very important, and it's not just printed books. but also to the extent that some parents are able to afford audiobooks. I remember one of my grandchildren with Nazi is going to 13. And he read a book, The Giver, which is about 800 pages. And he read it in a week. And before he did so, his father had read it, my son-in-law, for I think about a month. Because he wanted to know that it is appropriate for his son. And I read it last. And I beat my son-in-law, but not my grandson.
He beat you into it.
Yes. But then we sat down and discussed, the three of us now. What is it that, he picked from the book, and both of us adults picked from the book. And I was happy, first of all, to know that he can read something that's huge, and two, we can discuss it. So I think we need to use that as a substitute for those stories that we used to be told by our grandparents and our parents and senior people. And it is my hope that many of those stories are also going to be now reduced into writing, so that they can also be read, so that it's not just creative stories on their own. So I think there is a gap to be filled.
Mheshimiwa, you transitioned to university. How was it now coming to the University of Nairobi from the rural setup, where now, how did that change now joining the university? How did it feel joining the university, and what are the cultural changes or environmental changes that you actually came across? Because now I'm assuming the university had a lot of students and from different diverse parts of the country. How was that experience for you?
One thing that Machakos School, in the 6 years that we were there, did to me was there were children from most parts of the country. It was a national school, and it had kids from everywhere. Actually, most of the, parts of Kenya. So from secondary school, we learned that you're not just a Mkamba. Kenya has many other communities, and as young people, we grew up knowing that we belong to Kenya, not to our separate entities, tribal, ethnic entities, so to speak. And that did prepare me for university, because again, you came there and met the diversity of our country. And those days, there were people from Uganda in engineering and Tanzania. Some of my secondary school colleagues went to Dar es Salaam for law, others to Makerere for medicine. So it was even bigger than just Kenya. But I was already prepared for that diversity. I had actually not wanted to do law. I wanted to do literature, and still become a teacher, because in secondary school I'd been involved a lot in theater, and I'd even written a play while in secondary school, which was subsequently published. So I was prevailed upon by, again, some of my teachers. In actual fact, I remember most of the teachers in Machakos School were from abroad. Very few teachers were Kenyan, and mostly they were from UK. And something that I didn't say was how I ended up in literature and in English and in history, in the arts, economics, and so on. When I was in Form 1, first of all, there was a part of, like the first month, we really didn't, understand what the teachers were saying, because of their English, they would be speaking,
Yeah.
So I sat in a physics class. And then, I saw a socket. I hadn't quite seen a socket, you know, before, because even my first shoes to secondary school, when we went to buy the shoes, there was only a pair of ladies' shoes in that shop, which, you know, fitted me.
Yeah.
So that's what was bought. And when I came from one, they were laughing at me, saying that I've come, you know, in a girls' shoes. So I didn't want to become a lawyer, but my economics teacher, also my father told me that it is in law where you make money. You know, that being a teacher, you know, he didn't think he was a business person. He didn't think it was a good idea. So they prevailed upon me. But still, even after finishing law school, I still decided to be a teacher, what I had wanted, and to have, you know, to have the food that I was not able to have earlier on. So at university, initially, even in terms of focusing on law, I had a challenge because there was literature. Those were the days when there was Okot Papitek, there was Taban Oliyong, other professors of politics, like in political science there was Mutiso, in sociology, many. So there were many public lectures. So you were allowed to go to any public lecture. You could even go to a class. Like we would go to literature class, you would go to sociology, you would go to political science class, because we were few. So as a result, I didn't focus on law until Mutunga, the former Chief Justice, Willie Mutunga, influenced me a lot to show me that, you know, law was an important discipline, and you could study it and, you know, later even become a teacher. You didn't even have to practice as such. So the university also introduced us to student politics, even participating in national politics, because those were the days when, like, J.M. Kariuki was killed. Tom Mboya, I was in Form 3 that time, and we followed, you know, through newspapers at school. There was a board where a newspaper would be made available. So there was that interest in the politics of the country. And, you know, we used to criticize the first president and say that we didn't think that he was running government the way it should be run. You know, young people, a lot of energy, demonstrations. And initially there were demonstrations about food, that we want better food and so on and so forth. But that developed into national issues. And we looked down upon colleagues who said we should have demonstrations on the basis of, you know, food and so on. We said, you know, that was not good. But we didn't pay much in terms of, in actual fact, we were given boom. We were given some money after, you know, everything had been paid. So it was easy, unlike today when parents have to pay, when even the students have to look for accommodation outside. So it was actually quite easy. Sometimes when we got the money, the boom, we would suspend school until the money was, we utilized the money, we exhaust it, and then we come back to school. But I think it was a very, you know, I remember arriving at university and being able to even have a room to yourself. You know, that was big. I said, oh, is this my place? Only on my own? So you begin to kind of develop more as a person. And of course, you are introduced into Nairobi, and you know, Nairobi was very vibrant. So there is Nairobi and there's studies, and so you have to manage
the two,
both. Otherwise, you can get lost. By the way, by the time I came to the university, I remember during my primary school, we really ate a lot of wild vegetables. You know, you just go to the bush and you collect those wild vegetables. And we were frowned upon because those were the vegetables of poor people. Whereas today, they are recognized as very nutritious. But, you know, we thought that when you have those vegetables, it means you're poor. It's an indicator of your poverty. So, actually, I have had a big problem, a lifelong problem, not liking vegetables of any kind, any description, so that I have to force myself to, because we had a lot of those ones and we were told they were no good. So even at the university, when you know, you are given what are these raw vegetables called? Salad.
Salads, yeah.
You know, for a long time I couldn't eat salad because I was saying, you know, this first of all, this is raw, and it reminds me of the wild vegetables that I used to eat. You know, I used to eat. Even up to now, I have a challenge drinking water, even water, because in Makueni the water was so, it was red. It was because you know, we went to the place where, you know, the cows came to, and even sometimes dogs and donkeys. So, you know, we would teach to ourselves to take water when it was absolutely necessary. And again, you know, that has been a lingering problem, but we are coping with life.
You said Dr. Willy Mutunga, the former Chief Justice Emeritus, influenced you somehow into the legal profession. What was it that made you now concentrate, like you said? Because I could see at that stage your love was more into the literature aspect and teaching, because of course you wanted to run away from starvation at that time. What now made you concentrate fully in the legal profession, and perhaps now at the university take law seriously? Or is it that you just now said, now I'm already in the university doing law, let it take its own course? Because I'm sure there are viewers who are young here who are now having a problem picking also what they'd want to do in the university. Yeah.
We thought he was a teacher with a difference. First of all, he was relatively young. And he was also engaging. You know, some of the teachers were almost, one could say, impersonal. I remember there was one teacher, and we shall not name him, who, when he came to class, he could teach us. He looks at the window and he speaks, and then he looks at the other window, the other side, and there is no contact. So you really feel like, when is this 1 hour going to end? I remember there was another teacher who was, he had these yellow notes, and he would read them. And then one of the students discovered that they were just copied word for word from a textbook. So this student, there was a conspiracy. He decided to look like he's sleeping. So this teacher says, and of course it was a class in the afternoon, when this guy looks like now he has woken up, the teacher says, good morning. Why are you sleeping in my class? Then the student says, because I know where the notes that you're teaching us from, I know where they are. So I will just read the book, you know, later. So the teacher was furious. The professor was furious. And, you know, he decided he was not going to teach us anymore. And we got another teacher for that subject. So you had teachers who, you know, were very formal, because it's like that idea of the lawyer, you are formal and, you know, that kind of stuff. So when Willy comes, when Mutunga comes, he's very simple, he's dressed simply, he talks, you know, simply, and he engages students, he asks us to discuss, and when he has not prepared, he tells us that he's not prepared enough, so we'll have half an hour and he will go. You ask him questions sometimes, he doesn't have the answer. He says, I don't have the answer, I'm going to check. He encourages us in tutorials to really debate with him and with ourselves. So, and then critically, he would explain the foundations of law. He would teach law in a different way, not just the dry rules, but he would say, what's the genesis of, treason? What's the genesis of, he taught more of commercial law. What's the genesis of, these concepts? So you could study law from a historical, socioeconomic foundation. Yes. So it was more holistic, and you could now, he gave life to law, so to speak. So I think we liked him. And of course, we would discuss things which were happening within the country, political things and so on. We liked that as well. He got into trouble for it. But I think a tradition began to develop. And also when you go to other now classes where the other teachers also who are really looking at an education which liberates, so that it is not simply just, telling students this is the law, this is what it is, memorize it. When there is an exam, just repeat what I've taught you, and then you'll get an A. Don't criticize me. Don't be critical. Yeah. So I think we began to pick that there is more to education than just being like this banking method where they just bank information in you and then they hope you'll reproduce it and then you get an A. If your memory is good, you haven't forgotten. Like this mean score business. I think he kind of helped us to see that law could be vibrant, and I think because of kind of the creative nature that I kind of possessed, I thought that after all, law was not very dull.
Mheshimiwa, you've spoken about that, and when you were talking about yourself, you mentioned that you played a big role in your own way in the second liberation. Do you mind sharing with us how that was? And what major role did you play in the second liberation? Because I'm sure there are viewers who are very young who do not know the history and the role that you played in this country in terms of the second liberation.
When I came to the University of Nairobi as a teacher after a master's in the University of London and started teaching at 23, in 1977, the end bit of Jomo Kenyatta, and then we get into the Moi era. Within a short time, the country became very repressive. And friends of mine, got detained. Others, lost their lives. And we began to kind of agitate for change, especially after 82, when the country was declared a one-party state by law. It had been a one-party state since 69 de jure, de facto. By fact. Then we began to say that, no, this is not how Kenya should be. Kenya deserves better. And the 1963 constitution was changed until it was all patches. So there was now the movement and the universities, especially the teachers and the students, and then later civil society. So I went to study abroad for a doctorate, then came back 88. And this was about the time when the West was beginning to stop supporting dictators openly and supporting one-party states and saying that they need to liberalize. And so we got involved in terms of now saying we want a multi-party situation, we demand a new constitution. And because of my specialty of constitutional law and getting now involved in the civil society, because in the universities it became very difficult to teach, because you would teach and there would be spies in the class. You somebody would come and you would be told they were in another faculty and they are now a student, and some of them are perennial students, and you would know that they're coming to listen. And so from the end of the 80s and now beginning from 90s, we begin to now organize in terms of what do we want changed. And so civil society was very, very critical in terms of doing the spade work of research, whether it is what could be a model constitution, what are the areas that require changing, doing research, so that even by the time that now Moi and later Kibaki considered that there should be the change of the constitution, a lot of spade work had been done. And we said we don't want to overthrow the government. We just want to have a new constitution. And I remember those days, because I'd never been to State House. So there was pressure that the president wanted to see me, and those days they were able, I don't know about these days, but those days they were able even to look at the money, your accounts, and see whether you had money. So they even sent people in the intelligence from my community and said, tell this guy we have looked at his, the few accounts he has, and he's not a rich person. Because actually by the time I left the university, the salary was not even 100,000. So, so I was asked to, go and see Moi. Asked about what? How do you ask about what when you have been asked to see the head of state? Do you know that there are people who want to see him and never get the chance to see him? I said, if it's this matter of the constitution and so on and what we are doing, I will not be of help if I go alone. Why don't we, if you want us to go, why don't you ask us together? But I was told, no, it's not, we want you, you are their leader, and you're their leader, I said, we lead, many of us, we don't have one leader. And they said, okay, now we want to give you money so that you stop all this nonsense of the constitution. This constitution has been around since 1963 and it's good. First of all, we want to give you some money outside Kenya, so that we are not cheating you. So you will go outside Kenya, and they were suggesting South Africa. We'll put money there, and when you come here, we'll still give you more money. And I said, well, actually, by the way, I don't mind money, because I know I don't have a lot of it. Yes. But if you are going to give each Kenyan money, then I'll be on the line. And I'll also get money with everybody. So at some point they said, you are a fool. And they let me, of course, there were times that one was abducted, even my spouse.
How did you transition now from that young man who dreamed to be a teacher, to run away from poverty and starvation at that time, transition to now a lawyer, to a lecturer at the age of 23, then you transition to now doing the civil society. You joined the civil society and fought for multi-party democracy and governance and all this in the second liberation. And now here you are. At what point did you now join politics?
Even before joining politics, when I was at university, it was not, especially in the university as a teacher, there was a lot of repression, and it was not easy to teach. We got disillusioned. My friends were getting arrested. I was even, but as a student also, you get arrested because they think that you don't like the government. So there was a period when I got into heavy drinking. I remember even when Okot Papitek died, and we went to bury him in Gulu, we found he had not finished a bottle of teacher's whiskey. And we said, okay, we'll in terms of escorting our friend, we will finish.
Style.
We will finish this, and after that we went to the nearby bar. There was waragi, so there was a stint when you know, I got into, you know, drinking, and you know, sometimes you teach and make sure that you're finished your teaching midweek, and then from midweek to Saturday, you know, you are in the company of friends. We are drinking and making merry and stories. And of course, when you do that, it's not good for the family. It is not good for your income. It is not good it's not good at all. You know, friends tell you, why are you wasting your life? You know, we think you're a brilliant person. You have, you know, this job and you can go far. So why are you doing this? And I say, you know, this is how I want to run my life. You know, you leave me alone. So I remember once going to, I think it was called Grosvenor, where we went, and, you know, we start drinking at about 10. And we drink...
10 in the morning?
10 in the morning, you know. And we drink, it was, I think, a Saturday. We drink, then at about 6, I'm ready to go home. So we had bought a car, a ladder, and, you know, I think I made mental calculation. Now am I going to get home? Now from here, I am going all the way to the roundabout poster. Now that's the challenge. When I navigate that, we used to stay at Menelik. So now I'll go straight. The only other challenge is to divert into, you know, to get into now Menelik and Amom and Dry. So, you know, first of all, it was a challenge. First of all, putting the safety belt, which I did, and igniting the car, which I did. And so I start, you know, going home. So I'm woken up by a big bang. So in my mind then, I thought, maybe I have a puncture. So I said, now who is going to change, you know, this tire? I have a puncture.
Because at that time you're drunk.
Yes.
You don't understand now what is
Then
this.
I don't know that actually I simply just drove into the roundabout. I couldn't navigate. Because I slept. So now people come say, oh, he must be, you know, he must be very hurt and so on and so forth. And they say, are you okay? Then I realize this is not a puncture. And now I say to myself, if the police come here and get me here, and at the University of Nairobi, you know, we have such trouble with the government, they will now have gotten a good excuse to say that, you know, drunk and disorderly and causing damage and all that kind of stuff. So I said, you know, I feel I am unwell, I'm injured, I'm hurt, so I want to go to Kenyatta Hospital. So when the ambulance came, I told them Nairobi Hospital. So I reached the hospital. When I reached the hospital, I think I just slept.
So the patient was now sleeping.
Yes. So in the morning, the nurses, you know, when now they wake me up, and you know, I was, you know, asking myself where I was. I thought I was at home. You know, I was looking for my wife next to me on the bed. She was not there. So now it dawned on me that this is not home. This is the hospital. So this nurse comes and says, you're a terrible person. When you came here, you were so drunk that we got drunk from your fumes. And all this time, my family, you know, my wife is looking for me and so on. They look for me. They go to many places until the last place to go to was the mortuary. But somehow, you know, I communicated that I was now in hospital. I think I'd sobered up sufficiently. So, you know, at some point, I said to myself, I'm now going to make a decision. Either I'm going to dedicate myself to drinking. I don't want anybody to blame me, to ask me anything. I have decided this is how my life is going to be like. Or I'm going to say that this is not helping me. I have to look for another cause you know, in my life. And fortunately, I decided that I was not going to give my life to alcohol, and therefore, you know, I put a stop to that, and that is how I was able to now do my PhD and come into the country in '88 and begin to get involved in the pro-democracy movement and to be an actor in terms of how our country changed. So, you know, when I talk about that experience, I say to myself that when one is involved in an addiction, it might be drinking, it might be anything else. Unfortunately, people can really tell you, stop this. They can see that you are wasting yourself, yes, and it is not good and all that. But until, you know, God helps you, you help yourself to realize that it can't go on. It's not sustainable. People will talk to you and you will not listen, because many of my friends, including William Mutunga, my spouse, my parents, people had talked to me, and from 79 to 83, they talked to me, and it was not working until I decided that this is not a good life, and I will go nowhere. Even if initially I thought that, you know, there was frustration and all that kind of stuff, I thought that's still an excuse. I have to look at myself and I have to make a decision. So, in terms of transiting, and of course, when one shares this, one wants to share, you know, to say that when one is in that situation, you know, one can still get out of it. Some, you know, people have been in leadership or politics or whatever, might say, I want to hide certain aspects of my life, but I don't think that is necessary.
At that point that you are now drinking, was there something perhaps that was propelling you at that time? What was, because like you said, there were other factors, you felt frustration and all that. Perhaps also to the viewers, there are people who are battling these silent issues. It might be for yours, maybe it was frustration from work or what. But what were the circumstances that would make you, like you said, finish midweek and say, now I'm going to the bottle? And number two, how did that affect your life? Of course, you said it had an impact on your family and finances. But now looking back years now, what did that period from 79 to 83 mean to you? Now looking back in retrospect.
Well, of course, you know, there was frustration at the university. Actually, we used to go to the senior common room where you drank on credit. Each one of us who was a member had a book, so you sign, and at the end of the month, automatically what you have drunk is deducted from the salary before you get your salary. And I remember a friend of mine who would drink the entire salary. And one day, you know, we thought we were very clever. We said, why doesn't my friend take the book? So that they don't have the book to decide how much will be deducted.
Yes.
So they still took all the salary. So you can see that kind of ease of, you know, this alcohol which is available. And during those days also, alcohol can be used as a control mechanism. Even sometimes the young people, when they are exposed to cheap, you know, alcohol and so on, it can be used as a control thing and so on. But yes, there was the frustration of, it was a very repressive situation, so you can hide, so to speak, in alcohol. But I want to still say that it's a question of personal responsibility, because you can always have an excuse. You can say, you know, because other people are having the same problems, so how come they are not into alcohol, into whatever other drugs of choice they may get involved in. And I think one of the reasons for deciding that that's not a good route is when you also appreciate that you have had many excuses. You have had many excuses, and so you say, you can say this is genetic. You can say whatever it is. I think I have seen relatives drinking, and people from my clan, drink a lot, and you can have all sorts of excuses. But at the end of the day, it is a personal. It's what you have decided to do and a habit you have decided to get into, like any other habit which doesn't help you. And of course I read quite a lot. I began to read a lot about addictions, and now to listen. Even before now, I made the personal decision that it's not easy to save. It's not easy to advance, to ensure financial security, for the family. You're having those blackouts, and it's not a good thing. And you don't know what you did, and children, are not happy when they see you in a situation of that kind, and all. There was even a time, I don't know what got into my mind. I was walking from the senior common room. Now, this time I decided that I need to walk. I don't know, maybe I couldn't drive the car. I don't know what happened. And I came to DOD in Hurlingham.
Wow. That's quite a distance.
Yes. And I was just thinking that, these army people are bad people. They are the ones supporting the president to be to do what he does to the country. So I was shouting and shaking the gate. And those guys, thought that what is this guy doing? I think later I was told one of them was actually ready to shoot. So
until they realized it's a drunkard.
Until they realized that this, the other one, because actually they now in the morning escorted me home. They escorted me home when I said I'm a lecturer and so on, and it was not a good experience. So I think it is a question of when many people are quote successful. Sometimes it's important for them to tell what potentially stood in the way of that success, because it might be assumed that the road was always very smooth. Very smooth, but there was I was like filling up on an earlier question, but there's a substantive question you had asked me.
Yes. How was that in terms of the family? How did it take a toll on your family members? Of course, financially, you've already explained, because perhaps when you're doing that, to most viewers who are also battling alcoholism, they do not know the impact it has on the family.
It is tremendous impact. I think it is tremendous impact, because for a long time the kids are confused. They don't know why, a parent is involved in this. The spouse also has a difficult time. Maybe because of, maybe before you got into alcohol, there was a period when she saw a lot of love, and then she says, let me wait for this guy. He'll turn around. But during this period, it is not really, a nice thing. So I think to believe that you are just doing what you want as an individual, and therefore there is no impact on anybody else, even like there was a time I could have done better, in terms of my research. So there was that period that I wasted. I didn't do, the research that was necessary until, later. So you literally waste time and waste opportunities, even in terms of now beginning to, get promoted and all that. It takes time because you are not productive. The only advantage I had was somehow when I got into the classroom,
Executed.
I was, it was like a shrine. I really felt that here you have to deliver and focused on the classroom and focused on, just like how I'd learned from Willie, treating, my students as well as I could. Not just teach law, but even, try. And it is paradoxical because trying to mentor and so on. But again, I think, from that experience, I also learned how to, I learned to some extent, when some of my students had issues and so on, how to relate and kind of to try to help and friends.
Now you transitioned to politics thereafter. Yes. How was it, and what made you that time to decide that I want to be a member of parliament? What pushed you?
There was a time when Professor Sumbi, who was MP for Makueni, passed on, and I was being encouraged to get into politics. That was before 1997, I think. And 1997, yes. And I think I said no, that I was not interested in politics. First, we have to get the constitution. So we do the constitution up to Bomas, and now the constitution goes to parliament, so that the role for civil society in terms of that push is minimized, because now parliamentarians are going to take over. So I thought in 2002, if I go into parliament, I'm following the constitution, the draft, so that I can be part of finalizing that. And I also thought that I could be useful in terms of assisting the people of Makueni as a member of parliament. So I thought I'd reason to follow the draft constitution into parliament and to finish that particular work. So that was the initial motivation. But also it took time, because after 6 months, Kibaki got unwell. After 6 months, that's when I got appointed as an assistant minister in the office of the president. Because Kibaki, he was unwell, and he kept on asking where I was, and he was not sometimes communicating properly when he was unwell. And so he was asking where I was. Then, eventually I became an assistant minister in his office. But I must say, I really didn't, on the whole, enjoy, particularly being an assistant minister and a minister. Even when Kibaki was a very enlightened leader, because I think in Kenya, maybe up to now, the creativity that ministers and assistant ministers and permanent secretaries have is still limited. I think normally there is a tendency for any top leadership to kind of surround itself with key people, sometimes who are not necessarily ministers, who kind of make many decisions. So you may find that even as a minister, there isn't a lot of creativity you can initiate until there is a go-ahead. You're given a go-ahead, from that group.
Yeah.
And I think that's a model that may be from independence. That's why you hear chicken. Is it chicken? Kitchen, not chicken. Maybe also chicken and kitchen, because maybe there's some chicken there eaten.
That kitchen cabinet.
Kitchen cabinet, where things are cooked. So I liked, to some extent, the work that, because I was only minister for 2 years, about 2 years, I liked the work in terms of the land reforms, like the title deed, making sure that their title deed, particularly the coast where there were absentee landlords. People, long time ago had come, they'd gotten some land and they'd gone away, and, that was not a very, it was not, the land had been taken from the ordinary people and so on. I liked a bit of that, and actually was able to walk most of the coast, the 6 districts then, trying to help in that. I liked that. And sometimes going to the slums and trying to see when people are together, like in Nairobi, how can you help them in terms of, title, title deeds and so on. I liked that, and it was not easy work. It was not easy work either. In the environment ministry, I liked some of the international engagements, like when I was president of several UN conventions, including the climate change one in, I think, 2006, a bit of that. But on the whole, even with an enlightened leader like Kibaki, you always had that kitchen cabinet, and so. But what I liked about Kibaki was, like in a cabinet, he would kind of listen, and when he listens to people, eventually when a decision is made, he says, okay, then that's agreed, that can be done. There was that. He delegated a lot. He would say, this now can be done. He delegated a lot. But maybe it's the nature of our cabinets that generally they are not very creative, generally. And I don't know whether that's something from, of course you have people like Michuki, who come up with how to control the matatus, or, whatever. But I'm thinking of what, like if there's Vision 2030, and it's broken down to what must be done, and an agreement on what are the things that are going to be done so that the majority of people in a country will benefit. Like if you have, like for a long time, we have been talking about universal health. And somehow, since Anyang Nyong, Professor Anyang Nyong, Beth Mugo, when they kind of started that, we have been talking about it up to now. But nationally, it is yet to happen. Because I think unless you do things that many people get involved and many people begin to say, yes, this is the change that we have been waiting for, this is the transformation, so that you have this many young people into employment, you have, industries thriving, and therefore so offering that. You see, that is what I thought government was about, and that is what I was looking for, and therefore the frustration that even with an open president, still, I don't feel that transformation coming as quickly, as it would. And that's why, actually, when I became Kibaki's advisor, one of the advisors in constitutional, parliamentary and youth affairs, there were things that you could suggest and they get done. And maybe, I don't know, whether now that means that you are nearer the kitchen. You're nearer the kitchen. You may not be part of the kitchen, but you're nearer.
At least the door.
You are somewhere. Sometimes you are told, go and see whether there is a cup in the kitchen. But then, for example, one did quite significant work in terms of legal advice for the office, because there's still an attorney general. Actually, I remember during that time, as an advisor and as a lawyer, a lot of the letters coming to the president, you usually are asked to look at them, so that you kind of advise on what kind of responses, and sometimes you draft, and then the head of public service and the minister, then Saitoti, the permanent secretary Kememia, you know. So you can feel that there are certain things that you are doing. Some of them, like the Minister of Youth, you know, we were able to say that this is the youth. Really, we have been talking youth, 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 youth. Everybody talks about youth, 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 and we don't do concrete things. So we suggested that, and that's how Kuti became the first minister of you know, youth. So I was kind of ambivalent in terms of you know, what is it creative that that a cabinet does, that when you're in such a position. MP, there was of course the MP, there was of course the CDF. We had begun with the CDF, but again CDF was doing small things, you know, school fees, small things. Even up to today, CDF, you know, still does small things, although it's quite a bit of it. Now it has doubled, it has trebled. That you know, that was happening. But even then, there was the challenge of being MP and being also a minister, and particularly when I was minister in 2 ministries for 17 months. So it was quite a lot of work.
But how was it the first time that you went for the MP? Did you struggle in terms of, you know, there are people who join politics, try the first time and they lose and they give up, and others win and become a one-term MP. What was it? What are the challenges that you faced as a young person at that time joining? And when I say young, because it was your first time now going for an elective seat as a member of parliament, what are the challenges you faced at that time?
Of course, one of the challenges is this is a new space. It's a new space. You know, there are all those rules. Yes, we came initially through NAC, and when you come through NAC, you are not used to being a member of a political party. You are not one of the people who were there before. You're not. It's a club, and you are not actually quite a member of the club. Of course, the National Assembly itself has got, you know, there are also interesting ways of recognition, because if the speaker does not ask you to speak for a long time, people will say, you know, you don't speak, without them knowing that even if you raise your hand and you do whatever it is that now they do to be recognized, the speaker must recognize you. If he doesn't, and you begin to force yourself, sometimes he can throw you out. Then there was also the challenge of even being a lawyer. Many of the drafts are done by the Attorney General's office. Of course, the ministries will say, you know, what it is that they want to be made law. And I tell you, a lot of us got this law. Now we were debating it and doing all sorts of things. But we would be told, vote this way. And another group is told, oppose this way. And there were even times when we were told, when we would be told, oppose, or rather vote for it. Maybe it's an amendment which has been suggested. And then another decision would quickly be made. No, now do the opposite. You know, so, you know, even your own professional skills, you were not able to actually bring them to bear in terms of, you know, the legislation and so on. And sometimes, although it said MPs legislate, but their role in legislation might not be, you know, maybe sometimes they bring private bills, and which is rare because it's expensive and, you know, it requires a lot of work. So I think the legislative role many times is not as easy as we, you know, it's an exceptional circumstance when very important bills like Supreme Court Judge Justice Jokindungo was able to bring the Sexual Offences Act, or recently Kasanga, Honorable Sylvia Kasanga was able to bring the Mental Health a substantial mental health bill to become an act. So there is limitation in terms of, I found limitation in terms of, again, that, coming from civil society where we would do a model constitution, where we would do model laws of all things. We would do all those things, and we did a lot of work later, which now was adopted. Actually, from civil society, I think we were able to do more work in legislation than when one came into parliament, because like a lot of the constitution, actually, the drafts originated from civil society, and then they were adopted and taken around the country and so on, and debated at Bomas. Even the laws of anti-corruption, I think when we were in Clarion, we did a lot of work. I remember we published The Anatomy of Corruption in Kenya, 1993-94, and we got into big trouble when we were saying, all the issues with corruption and so on, Golden Bag and all that kind of stuff. So I think that's why in earlier conversation I said that I found that the Parliament, the National Assembly specifically, was not necessarily a place for a lot of change. It isn't structured. And that's why today we may blame MPs, and we may say that they've been bought, and we may say many things. But we still need to reform our institutions so that the people that we elect, when we elect them properly, following the law and all that, free, fair elections, transparent, and so on, so that they can actually play their role. Like many of them should be very vocal in terms of proper legislation, representation, oversight. So,
did you face, just taking you back, while the first time you're going to vote, because the last general election, perhaps I can speak of that, there was a cry that if you don't have money, you cannot be on the ballot, you have no chance. Although again, in the same election, there were people who came in who had no money, and very young actually, who made it to parliament through the vote, and people were actually shocked, During your time, when the first time you were vying, now you're not an MP, you're just moving from the civil society, and you're looking for these votes, was the issue of money still unique at that time in the 2002 general election?
On the whole, no. I don't think at councillor level, at MP level, I don't think that for many people, money, apart from those who were in Kano, for them money was an issue, because the party had lost prestige, clout, and they had the money. Therefore, they used the money. But I think the sensitization during that period was, take their money, but don't vote for them. So because of the build-up of NAC, to the extent that even Kibaki got more than 60%, 62 or so percent of the vote, you didn't have to, pay. Because I remember coming from the university, I didn't, there was no money. Even if I wanted to give anybody money, there was no money.
So you just sold your agenda to the people. So
you sold the agenda, and the people realized that, you didn't have money, and you are telling them that I want to come and help you. And of course, I was lucky because I had worked in the community itself before, in terms of like land right issues. Also, people who were agitating for change. I had also gone to court for them when they were arrested. So I had been present within the community. And this is a place where I grew because of that earlier history. So many of the players now were age mates and so on, who were acting politically and so on. So during that time, those who were in NAC we really didn't, most of us would not use.
How do you compare now that to the subsequent elections that you've participated? From the first time when 2002, when you came in through the wave, actually we called it the NAC wave.
Yes.
That swept the country, across the country. Subsequently, has the political scenario changed in terms of campaign and that there must be money?
Yes, it has changed drastically. Today I was involved in a meeting where I was saying, like, 2022 elections. In most parts of the country, when you went to a campaign, the people told you, you know, we are going to elect you, don't waste your time. And they were already queuing, waiting for money. Whether it's 50 shillings, whether it's 100 shillings, whether it's 200 shillings, you know. And then later, they would, before the elections, they would sit in a home, so many people together, like of a polling station, and then wait again to be given money. And sometimes whoever had more money, you know, would make it. And even sometimes we would be promised that we will give you a bit of money now. After you vote and we verify that you voted for us, you'll come for the rest. So unfortunately, money and ethnicity, and therefore also political parties, given what is the political party of a region, became or have become very decisive. And somehow the citizenry, they have this thinking that these politicians will not help us anyway. So if we don't get money now, they'll still not help us. So we'd better get money now, and they can just go and do what they usually do. And unfortunately, that is why, like, a lot of young people, you know, they might come for the money and they will not even come to vote. Others will not even register as voters. So that about 8 million of those young people didn't vote, and the people are registered and they don't vote. Others never even registered to vote. So that even with the people who contested and the votes that they got, there is another group which voted by not voting, which makes the situation dicey. Because you may say you have a majority, but there's that quote silent majority, which has decided that
supersedes the ones who voted total.
Yeah. Now, for a long time, the campaign finance law has not been approved so that it can be operational, so that it can say the maximum that you can spend is so much, and, you know, for the various you know, categories, and also you account later, so that if it is discovered that you have cheated, then your election can be challenged.
Yes.
So, you know, in terms of cleaning up elections, that's a major thing. And the fact that you can still use public resources, you can use, you know, institutions, public institutions, and so on and so forth, in ways in which you are not supposed to. Because, of course, if you are president and you're campaigning for a second term, you can't, you know, still you are the president. So there are certain things that you are allowed to use, but the others you are not allowed to use for your campaigns, including, you know, state money for campaigns. So I think we are going in a wrong direction in that aspect, because unless we are able to control the influence of money in elections, the influence of state also resources, the influence of ethnicity, you know, we will not get there. We will not get there, because if you, for example, control what we used to call provincial administration.
Yes.
They can help you get many votes. And the you know, the government machinery, to speak. My doctoral thesis was on elections. So I know a bit of things about elections, and but I was always disadvantaged in terms of elections, to the extent that even when I was campaigning to be governor first time, I didn't have the kind of money that I had. People, you know, like people
Your
spend
opponents,
100 million shillings,
Yeah.
whatever, you know. I didn't have that, even the second time, because unless you steal from
Yeah.
a county so that you have a lot of money, and then you can, you know, bribe your way, then it means that you will be disadvantaged if money is a factor.
Mheshimiwa, you were a minister and an MP. Perhaps just the highlights quickly, the highlights that Kenyans can remember, the people that you one time served as a member of parliament. What are the key things you did for your people while you were an MP, first of all, before we transition to minister? Just as an MP, what are the key things that you can remember that you did for your people, that the younger generation and people watching who were your constituency at one point can relate and say, yes, Mheshimiwa Kivutha Kibwana did this for us while he was an MP?
Of course, in terms of the CDF, I tried as much as possible so that it couldn't be, you know, people couldn't, you know, like the committee steal, or myself. And therefore, if it was a schools, if it's a water project and so on, even when I was campaigning to be governor, people would come and tell me that you helped us with this and that, whether it's a school, it's a water project. So that I tried as much as, you know, I could. When I had also the advantage of being also a minister, particularly Minister of Lands, I also tried to assist, as I was doing, not just in Magoeni, but in terms of title deeds.
Yes.
And people remember, you know, that was a lot of, you know, assistance. And even more than the physical things, just the presence, so that people know that when they have issues, you will be there, you know, with them and so on. I think, you know, that was something that one did.
Now when you transition now from a minister, in the different capacities you served, what are the key things that you would want Kenyans to remember that this was a Kivutha project? Although you said being a minister was like a job, yes, but there was no creativity, as I might quote your words, and no creativity much also for an assistant minister. However, in that circumstance, what is it that you can highlight that Kenyans can look back and say, yes, this was Kivutha's? You talked about now the title deeds while you were the Minister of Lands, but what other things do Kenyans do not know, or perhaps the younger generations do not know that you actually did?
Well, I think because that was still the 5 years of being MP, this is why I discussed about, you know, the schools, the water projects,
Yes.
What therefore the CDF could do,
Yes.
and also what being in the government, what I was also able to leverage, to lobby and leverage. Also being very, very careful that you don't use that position to just advantage where you're coming from on it.
Now I'm talking about holistically as a minister. You said you did like the Ministry of Environment. Kenyans as a whole now, the entire country, what is it that you did at the hallmark of the Ministry of Environment that you would wish Kenyans to remember, or the Ministry of Lands, holistically now as a country?
I think in terms of like the period that I was a minister for those 2 years, like I talked about what we tried to introduce in terms of land reforms, whether it was in the very difficult situation of absentee landlords dealing with title deeds. I think that we began to try. And unfortunately, sometimes you would make titles available, and then some people would even forget you're the minister who brought the titles, and they would be saying, I want to sell. So we even tried, we didn't succeed, to make sure that when you get a title, you can't sell immediately. But we did a lot of that. I think during the period of environment, like getting NEMA, to begin to do its work as it should, so that you don't get approvals which later create issues. And I think in those two ministries, it was also known that it was, I was not somebody to be corrupted, whether it is in lands, because, people would ask me, how come you didn't get land? How come, we don't see
scandal attributed to
the kind of riches that people are supposed to have when they are like being in two ministries, particularly land. So that was evident, and during that time, making sure that within the ministry, in land issues, are the house,
Yes.
that we begin to introduce order and people get services. I think we tried to do that even within that short period. So those are some of the things that we did.
Now you transitioned and became the governor for Makueni. How was it now becoming a governor? Because you are now moving, you've actually metamorphosized. You moved from from a lecturer to a legal practitioner, and of course still lecturing law, moved to the civil society, to a member of parliament, to a minister, and now here you are. You are the first governor of Makueni. How was it being the governor of Makueni, and what are the challenges that you faced at the time that you became the governor?
First of all, I knew that being a governor was a position which could help your people, those you are serving in the county. Because having been part of making the constitution, I saw the opportunities. Some of my colleagues were going to be senator because they thought that still in parliament and in Nairobi, you are going to make more decisions and you are going to hold governors accountable. And so there are colleagues who opted initially, to go, Keraitu, Orengo, I think Anyang, Nyong, they opted to go to Senate, yes. Initially. But my reading of the Constitution was, if you really want to do things that touch on the livelihood of your people, the governorship will give you that opportunity. Of course, it was a very new thing because you were beginning to create institutions to bring workers together, processes, procedures, the whole works. And, there are people coming from the national government, the others coming from, in terms of employees, from the local authorities. There are new people. So there are new institutions to be created. So it was also not an easy thing. But I had advantage working as a dean of the Faculty of Law in terms of administration, working in civil society, where there was also a lot of managerial skills building, having worked as a minister, although the permanent secretary ordinarily is the accounting officer and the person who does day-to-day things. So, but there was that experience, and the idea that resources that either come from the development partner in terms of civil society or come from the national government, when you're a minister, they are not your resources and you must take care of them. You must be very prudent in terms of their application. So there was that background. And of course, the exercise of constitution making itself is creating institutions on paper, of course, in law. So again, you can visualize creating new things. because of also that experience. But you see, when now you get into, now you are the boss. You are the boss because you are the governor. Now there is leeway to make certain decisions, and the ball. What is the expression?
The ball is in your court now.
Yes.
Yes.
So I go into Makueni, and because that time I was working with President Kibaki, a mentor, somebody I really loved. So he was a father. So I tell him that now I want to be governor. Actually, President Uhuru had wanted me to be a CS. Somebody was sent to me, to ask whether I wanted that, but I said already I had committed to being a governor. Now, when...
How was President Kibaki's reaction when you told him you want to be the governor?
He supported.
That's
he
nice.
supported, and even when we had a trip in going some places in Makueni as we campaigned, he said that for me and also Alfred Mutua, he said that we would help the people if we were chosen. So he was very generous. He was very generous. So apart from now this complexity of creating a government from more or less fresh, from ab initio, now you get people whose vision of a government is different from what you think a government should do. Because in the first 3 years, we almost didn't have a working government in Makueni, because the MCAs, many who had been councillors, told me, now, Professor, we have an opportunity to, and they were very blunt, to eat, because people in Nairobi are eating. So now this money which has come here, first of all, we eat, and then,
Wananchi baadaye.
wananchi later. So, I thought they were joking, and some of them are people that I had been, working with when supporting them a bit, when I was minister, when I was in office of the president. So I thought they were joking, because in the first budget, they wanted 1 billion, about 100 people, the MCAs and the staff. They wanted 1 billion from 4.3. So that for the rest of the people, about 1 million, 3.3, and then 1 billion, 100 people. I said that this can't work, because we are coming here to really help our people. And so they sent somebody from, a neighbor to come and tell me that that is how it should be. And I have to accept, and even when they use that 1B, and the rest is used, by the 1 million, they will always support me. They will go to the people, they're on the ground, they will tell the people that this is a good governor, and that is what they will do to promote me. And I said no. Until even we reached a point where now, because they were serious, because they must pass the budget, because the county assembly and the national assembly, actually parliament in totality, they are structured more or less the same. So they couldn't pass the budgets. And I said, okay, if you don't pass the budgets, I will not accept, I will not sign a budget which says that you can have so much money. They tried to impeach me. Even at some point, tried to shoot me, and they shot 5 people whom we are going together for a meeting they had called at the assembly. Of course, I was from a minority party, Muungano, and the major party was, I think those times, ODMK, which became Wiper. We actually, eventually the citizens, I told them that I have to go, I can't do this job. Because if I'm going to do this job, then it flies on the face of everything that I've believed. And I don't want to do this. And that is why they now initiated winding down the county government. And, you know, they collected signatures, they brought them to the president, and a commission came to Makueni of Nyaoga. And the commission said, yes, this government should be disbanded and all that. But I think although that was a difficult situation, and maybe I was a bit hard, maybe, you know, I don't know how flexible I could have been, but I tried to convince them that this is not the right way. And religious people came to get us to talk, professionals, people from the diaspora. The control of budget eventually, you know, helped us to kind of resolve this issue. When the MCS realized that
you're not backing down,
I'm not backing down, and I must believe in, you know, the fact that most of the money should be used by the citizens, not us. So that was not a nice experience as such. But I think it was clear to the citizens, it was clear to them, and even we saved other counties, these impeachments and ministers being, you know, when they don't give money to them, being called to the assembly and all that. So there was a bit of a break in terms of these runaway impeachments and, you know, wanting to censure county executive members. And I think, you know, from that period, actually there was a time, because the speaker was from the deputy president's party, from deputy president then William Ruto. There was a time I had to call him and tell him, please tell this guy he's actually not helping us. He's making life, you know, very difficult for Makueni, because he would boast that he has the support of big officers. And it was from that time, then now, when we started making, you know, headway and really beginning to construct a government where there would be, you know, public participation, significant public participation, so that for our budgets, for our policies, for bills, for, you know, those major things, we involve people from the village, from our 36, 47 villages then. That is where our public participation began. So that from a population of about 1 million, we would have, in some occasions, about 100,000 people participating. And we went to something we called a cluster, 10 villages together. Those were 377. We went to sub-ward, about 60. We went to ward 30, to 6 sub-counties, and to the county, we call them people's government. So that there was no budget which could be passed until the county people's forum pass it first, and then it goes to the county assembly. And even we would agree that whatever award are said, you know, is absolutely important for them, you know, we sign and we say that that will be done, because they have said that these are the things that are major for us. Even when we came up with universal health care, where for 500 shillings, they could get, you know, inpatient, they could get operations, they could get consultations, drugs, and so on, is because they said that's a big issue. Even when we came with factories like mangoes and green grams and so on, it is, they said that if this happens, then whatever we produce will get value.
So what are the key highlights that you achieved as a governor of Makueni? As you now served the people of Makueni, what can the people of Makueni look back and history look back now that you no longer the governor, looking back, what are the key things that you look back and say, wow, this I did for my people in Makueni? What are the key highlights?
I refuse to say that I had any personal legacy in Makueni, and not that because, you know, one does not want to be associated with success as such, but there wasn't anything I did on my own. It was still following the principle of collective leadership and collective effort. Because whatever we did, the assembly eventually got involved, the executive committee, all the organs that we had created, the people themselves, because if a lot of the things that we did originated from the people, if they say universal health care,
Yes.
so that for a household for 1 year, they pay 500 shillings. And if you're hospitalized, you don't pay anything. If you have an operation, you don't pay anything. If you go for cancer treatment, it was only cancer, dialysis, maybe some of the, if you want expensive teeth and so on, it was subsidized. So we ran that, and it really, helped people tremendously. When we have, when we come and we discover that the ECDs, they weren't really proper. ECDs as such, and you begin to build and you employ, ECD teachers. When you begin to have that value addition, and you help people in terms of, most of them are like, for example, they do mangoes, and you help them in terms of, you help them to first of all agree on that one, and then even for that one there is like a project management committee.
I like that you said that as your tenure as the governor of Makueni, you encouraged public participation.
Yes.
So that the problems could find solutions.
Yes.
And after that, you'd work with the team, the county assembly universally, and you were able to achieve at least healthcare, universal healthcare in your county. I also saw there was a park in Wote one time.
Yes. I think what we did was what we did together was significant. If you talk about the healthcare, when you talk about, begin to have ICU, to begin to have trauma center, to begin to have a place for mental health, physiotherapy, something that I don't think it has happened in another county yet, having a full-fledged counseling unit, so that, in that particular department, when you have like major markets, and of course, because we worked closely with the development partners, because they knew their money was secure with us. So we accessed quite a bit of the money. That public participation idea that each project is managed by a committee of the citizens, and therefore you can't get paid, even if the professional people say yes, even if the county administration says yes, unless those representatives of the beneficiaries say yes, you can't be paid.
Weshima, do you know the reason why I've asked that? Because some time back, while you were the governor of Makueni, so many Kenyans felt that yes, you did a lot of good things as a governor as compared to other governors, and most of the counties were now coming to benchmark on your side. The reason why I asked that question is because viewers and perhaps even governors watching can pick on those ideologies, because you see, we are looking at transformative leadership, and at the helm of your seat at that time as the governor for Makueni, you were able to achieve what you could achieve despite the challenges and the setbacks for the first initial 3 years. So the highlights of that was that you said that you put public participation and committees that were able to streamline all this, and you were able to achieve what you did achieve. That's why we humbly asked, what are the key highlights? Perhaps there are other people who are watching who would wish and say, you know what, Professor Kivutha Kibwana gave us an idea. Why can't we also try this? Of course, the situation is different per county, but just the general overview of the highlights that Makueni, under your leadership, achieved.
There was actually something very critical, I think, that happened as well in the finance management space. We were able to start open contracting, so that every information about contracting is available to the public. And therefore, if you do anything wrong, as somebody who is involved in procurement, the evidence is ready waiting for you if you are accused in a court of law. So that the entire process, we didn't want to hide any information because Makueni, as a county, we are not dealing with security contracts or things like that where you maybe sometimes have to, I don't know, keep some things private. So we begin that system of open contracting, and that is why at some point, I think 2017-18, we and Nyandarua were the two counties which had a report which was unqualified, meaning that the books were correct. And that is something we prioritized in terms of, we really wanted the money that we get to be used for the public. And that is something that maybe has not been understood, that it is possible in a government to make procurement so transparent that people can't do monkey business within that system without getting easily caught. And I thought that was something that was important. Another thing, I remember even in terms of the health, I remember President Uhuru coming to Makindu. There was a KMTC, that there was an official event. And we told him that we are doing universal health care for 500 shillings per household per year. And he said it's not possible. I told him, no, it's possible. We are doing it, sir. And later, even they got the minister who was the young minister for health to come and work at the national level. And actually, even the universal health care, initially it was not my idea. The young people came to me who were in the health department, and they told me that this can happen. I said, how? They told me that every year we collect from the citizens who come to hospital about 100 million shillings. So if we can get each household to pay 500 shillings in Makueni, and there are about 200,000 households, we can get the same money and we can treat people. And that was the basis, of course, apart from leveraging on NHIF and Linda Mama and education, whatever, insurance and all that kind of stuff. So again, you see, that also taught me that you listen to all these people who are in the government, listen to people. We worked with the diaspora, we worked with our professional people. They knew that they could bring in ideas and we could act on those ideas because, you are the governor and you don't know a lot of, you are a lawyer. So how do you know things about agriculture, about economics? The only thing that you are able is when ideas are brought to you, you can shift, sift them?
Yes.
And see what you think can work, and you're being helped. So there was that. We actually helped the country to, in terms of and this was from my experience of Minister of Environment, like getting the ward level, getting the grassroots, the local level to work in environment, climate change. The initial regulations about, how to make sure that there is the law about climate change funding dedicated to the county, to the wards, forming the committees, getting the committees to do projects, because even before we had done in agriculture, something that we were trying, something that happens at Yatta, Bishop Masika, farm pond, agriculture through farm ponds.
Yes.
So we had that experience of doing things at the lower level. So we actually, this what is now Flocker. through the World Bank was initially piloted in Makueni. So one can mention many things that we did together, and so that's why even maybe by the time I left, the NEPAD had come to Makueni to see what we'd done in 10 years, that is the county peer review mechanism. And we had made a report of what we had done, and we were waiting for now that particular report to be subjected to governors and to experts and so on for finalization. So we may not have talked a lot about what we did, but the media did quite its share of that because, first of all, we were doing it all together. And I thought, if you say, I have done, I haven't. We have done,
I like your humility, Mheshimiwa,
yeah,
because if
together.
it was a normal politician in this country, is that I have done. Everything is I have done. Now we've at least been able to see your transition, and I'm sure viewers, you've seen the transition of Professor Kivutha Kibwana. Mheshimiwa, you now came to the general election 2022. How was the aftermath for you? Because there are so many viewers who, after an election cycle, especially the last cycle, who sank into depression. There are people who sold their properties just to do politics and put the investment there. And after the loss, things changed. Others felt that after the loss, conversations were no longer the same. People were no longer calling like before. How was that change for you after the aftermath of the general election?
I think one can go back to after the first term of being member of parliament, when I stuck with Kibaki in PNU,
Yes.
in PNU, and there was a wave in Ukambani against people who were supposed to be supporting the Kikuyu. And as a result, even when you have done some significant work for people, they say, we are voting with our tribe and you are not a friend of our tribe. That time I was actually disappointed because I thought, there is really, there's been significant work, that one has done and so on and so forth. And of course, coming from also the university, coming from the civil society, I thought we were beginning to go beyond ethnicity and so on and so forth. And then, of course, even when Kibaki was approached to be told that people who had not stood with a particular politician should not be in the government. But at least I got a job again. I was already employed as a professor of law in Kenyatta University, but I was asked by Mzee Kibaki to come and work as his advisor. In 2022, I think it's just a repeat of this negative ethnicity, but more so people being told that if you have been a governor, that's a very big position. And really, senator is a junior position, so that's not something that you should do. And of course, when like in AZIMIO, when some of the leaders from the region are in AZIMIO and AZIMIO is in government and so on, it is also easy for the elections to be, if I can say, maneuvered in a certain way so that you don't have advantage. So, I said to myself, I knew that maybe some of the younger people who are coming to occupy, some offices required some assistance. And I said as much. But because of, those factors of, what happened, and again, I didn't have the money because I had not made it my business to take away, money so that I can compete with people who are paying a lot of money. So I said, this is okay. I don't think, it is a reason to get depressed. One has done 45 years of of public service. So I know there are some of my friends who got quite depressed because they felt they had really, done a lot and so on and so forth. But I didn't, find any reason to get depressed, but sometimes you sit and then time will tell, because at some point, people begin to say, we now understood what you were, talking about and so on. But people always say that. So, I take it with a pinch of salt. And,
That's yourself.
people, of course, had said, why didn't you stand for being president? There was a lot of pressure for me to stand as a president. I still thought that it requires a lot of money. Here in Kenya, and Oburu said, you must have the state. That is what they were missing. Now that they had the state, they would win. They didn't also know that Ruto had the state. It was not Uhuru alone who had the state.
So what made you jump ship? Because you were in AZIMIO in the last general election. And immediately after the election, we saw you moving to now Kenya Kwanza.
I went to see the president, and they said that, I wanted to, support. Because I knew that within AZIMIO, there were some games which had been played. And I realized, some of the games, like in the elections, there were places in the county where elections started 1 p.m., 2 p.m. And when they go into the night, some people come and they vote for as long as they want to vote. So I realized that there were those, games played. Even after trying to assist to using even the civil society experience to mobilize 15,000 people to be agents in the region, to be agents to do civic education, water education, and all that. Those people were denied the badges. So that actually explains why, for example, in Lower Eastern, AZIMIO didn't have, for the president, didn't have agents. So I realized, all those had happened, and maybe I reacted by saying now, because I know what has happened on this particular side, and it was, I could have seen the signs, but I didn't want to see the signs. Because actually, even for AZIMIO, initially, KALONZO did not come into AZIMIO until the three governors did a lot of spade work and more or less pushed him into coming to AZIMIO. So I went to, after that, I went to the president and I said, I could assist. I did in the legal case as a researcher from the background. I did that. But later I decided that really it was time to do something else. And that's why I applied to be chair of EACC, because I thought that I had experience in that area from my work in government and from my academic work to do that work. And before I did that, I resigned from being a member of any party. So as we talk today, I'm not a member of a political party. So I'm not an officer of a political party. So I'm a free Kenyan.
And what next now? Do you still have a cordial relationship with the current regime in terms of you're still available to work with them in terms of guiding them? Or now did you decide when you said you retired, did you decide enough of this political scene I do not want, I would want to serve in other capacities?
Currently, I'm serving in very beautiful capacities, like as I indicated earlier, with my grandchildren, with my spouse, with family generally, nucleus and extended. I read a lot. I, try to write. I'm doing quite significant work in youth mentoring. I have never been good in business, so that's a challenging area. I do occasional consultancy. As I said, next month I'll be 70. That's quite a bit of years. So I really would not like to get engaged where I'm going to feel that there isn't much I can contribute. I would not like that, but I know that there are certain issues in the law, like writing about the constitution, about elections, about devolution, and even writing creatively. So I was in discussion with our first daughter, and my spouse also. She's thinking of working on memoirs and some things. I hope I've not said something that you would want me to say in public, but I'm excited about that. That's something that also I want to, give time to, because I think it's very, very important. So let us say my hands are full for the time being.
Thank you, Mheshimiwa. And now the last question. Looking at the current situation of the country, what would be your advice if the president is watching today? What would be your advice, given you are a person who served this country in different portfolios, like I said, spanning from a professional in the legal profession, you moved to being a lecturer, moved to the civil society, served as a member of parliament, minister, advisor, assistant minister, and governor. What would be, because that shows that you have enough vast experience in terms of leadership, what would you advise the current president today, given the status of the country and the situation that we are in?
Let us even go back to Makueni. I went to visit with the governor, and in our conversation I said, I'm available if you would like any assistance, and mostly advisorial. I would be available. And of course, sometimes I learned when I worked for Kibaki that as an advisor, you advise and that's end of story. You don't say, I advised for this to be done, especially when somebody's alive whom you advised and you say, I'm the one. I think there was somebody who was my speech writer, and then he went to some place and was saying, that speech, that very powerful speech, I wrote it myself, and I think he got fired.
Yes.
So even advising in private for like in my county, because it's my county, and if there is anything that I can do to assist, and I don't, it doesn't have to be said that this came from so and so, not at all. In the same way, I'm sure, since I'm a Kenyan and I'm a loyal Kenyan, if the president wanted my advice, he would seek it not through an interview. He would say, I would like you to advise on 1, 2, 3 things. And he has many advisors anyway. He has many advisors, so one would be one of them. If the opposition asked me to advise, I would also advise. I think it is better if you are approached for advice rather than advising when you are not asked to. Or don't you think that's a good answer?
Mheshimiwa, your choice of words, it's very kind of you. I'm sure the president has had, or the opposition has had, and all leaders. You said you are mentoring youth also.
Yes.
Something close to you.
Yes.
What would be your advice now to the youth? I know you said you can't advise where you're not asked to advise. But on this one, because you're particular about mentoring the youth, and there's the aspect of social, mental health, there's the aspect of mentorship around, and we have youth who, like I said, have no motivation. Some of them say, we've looked for jobs, you tell us to be graduates, we are graduates, there are no jobs. Others have no interest with what is happening in their country. What would be your advice now to the youth on matters youth that you feel the youth need to hear? And if you could go back, you would advise your younger self?
First of all, I would advise my younger self, alcohol was a wrong thing to do. I would do that, and I would say, to really put in time to education, because, like I said at the university, I was doing everything, and you must focus. I was doing everything. You go to political science, you go to sociology, you go to everywhere, literature, and so on. So there was time when there wasn't enough focus on, first of all, the law. But fortunately, after second year, I began to focus. Second and third year. First year, I was everywhere, Kid was just arrived in Nairobi, and so at the university, and you are everywhere. In terms of all those disciplines. It's positive, but also lack of focus is not always good. And of course, one read broadly in many areas, but still focus is essential. I didn't do a lot of private practice. I did pro bono. So I didn't like what my father told me, you need to, make money, I thought, let me make people, not make money, I thought. But financial security is important. I would advise my younger self. Financial security is important without stealing from the public, definitely, so that there is reasonable comfort for family. The youth, I can talk about the youth with the youth authoritatively, because since I was university teacher, I took a lot of interest in, like today, maybe when one goes to the Supreme Court, I think most of the people in the Supreme Court, I was able to teach them at some point. And they remember that I was not a very bad teacher, despite my initial issues, but we overcame those issues. A lot of, apart from the older people who are taught by Gibson Kamau Kuria, Rukwaro, Professor Mutungi, and so on, and others who went to DA, there's a big number of people that I was able to, be one of their teachers. And when we meet, they say, you are not a very bad teacher. But there was not just teaching, but there was that mentoring, there was that kind of being empathetic and seeing what are the issues, and I remember sometimes even talking to young people, young men, who kind of, the boyfriend was snatched by somebody who had a car, and somebody wanting to commit suicide, and, we talked, we would, do those things. And we did quite a bit of that, especially, again, when I was dean of the faculty of law. I was chairman of a department for, I think, 2 weeks, and got fired because they said I was anti-government. Again, during Moi days. But the reason I say that, like during civil society, the youth agenda, a lot of the organizations and many of the, some of the critical leaders, yes, during that time, we worked together in civil society. The Nambarire, we worked with Akena Keraitu, was my student. Sometimes, you know, when I said that, and he was a minister, and he didn't like that. Gitu, you know, a lot of people, and I thank God for that. So that's when that nexus with young people kind of developed. And so today, when I when I say that I like to mentor, to advise, to work together, to talk, and all that, is because there is a relationship. So it's not like, you know, saying that I will not advise in certain quarters if I'm not asked to advise, but for them I can, and even you know, things that one has written and all that are focused on you know, young people, because I believe that's the generation that must be formed, must be mentored, must be grown, so that we have Africa that works, a Kenya that works. Because if those come into leadership and they are not prepared, then we are losing the continent. We are losing our country. So I would say to young people, if you look back in history, like Kimathi, those who fought for Kenya's independence, they were hardly, you know, many were in their 20s, few in their 30s. So it took the courage of young people to actually free Kenya. Some of the older people, like Kenyatta, were not the people who really fought in the forest, or, you know, or made the decisive push for independence. And even some of the people who were in government earlier on, like Tom Mboya, like they were very young as well. So it means that even when you are young, you have the capacity to actually do lots of leadership. And even when it came to the Katiba, a lot of the people who did the real pushes and the demonstrations and so on were still the young people, with zeal, with vision, with passion. So this is a group that makes the difference. And that's why, you know, I have significant interest in it. But it comes to organization, because they have to be organized. They have to decide that they must take charge. They must, the agency to do what is required to change their country, it's in their hands. Because if I'm 70, within a short while, I will not be really available as such. So it means that there's a generation which must take over. And if they are not prepared, then it will not be easy for them, even if they were to get into positions. Like a lot of people in positions, they don't seem to make the difference that we would like them to. So I have been thinking that young people, if they decide that some of the things that distract them, like the drinking I was talking about, and like the, you know, socializing, which sometimes is over socializing, and like being in a situation of despair and saying that these people, like in social enterprise, young people can say, what are the solutions in this country? And how can we solve them through, you know, through social enterprise? And one can be creative in that space. One can be creative in agriculture. One can be, you know, creative in startups. One can, there is creative thinking required. Even in terms of like the 30% procurement, you know, how does one get into that for women, for youth, for persons with disability, other marginalized communities? So it is like saying, if some young people saw opportunity to get the colonizer away, if some other young people saw the opportunity to get a constitution going, Now it is the time to implement it. It's the time for economic liberation. So I believe that that is possible. And I'm seeing young people who are getting involved in saying we are going to be proactive. We are not just going to whine and continue whining. But of course, some assistance, some direction, some support, mentorship, and all those things are needed.
Yeah.
And I think the future really is with these young people, because without them there isn't another future. And that's why I keep on telling them that you can't despair, because if you despair, then we are done.
Mheshimiwa, the last question as we close the show for today. You have served this country with great humility, I must say. Dedicated your time also to making sure that whenever you're given a portfolio or a position, you do your best. You're also a living example that you can grow gradually, and it's not about a quick fix as the younger generation think that you should wake up in the morning and everything is sorted. You're actually what they call the self-made, that you've gradually grown and you can see the track record to where you are, and God is going to bless you to turn 70 soon. You can see the track record. You said you fought for the second liberation, and that is in history, and we've moved to the Constitution dispensation, which you played a key role, and even the advisory role after we promulgated the 2010 Constitution. Now in your take, how do you see this country as it is, the state of the nation as it is currently? Are you happy as a person who actually walked the journey to transform this country, to bring forth a 2010 Constitution, which we hold dearly? When you look at the status now that you're not actively in the arena, when you look at the country holistically, do you think we're headed in the right direction?
I think there are some people who still think that the constitution that we have is the 1963 constitution, not the 2010 constitution. And of course, there was a lot of struggle to get to the 2010 constitution, which was itself also a compromise, because earlier versions of it were perceived to be more radical. But still, the 2010 constitution is viewed as very progressive, like the South African constitution and so on and so forth. But we have to accept to be, guided by the constitution, by laws, by the policies that we also make. Those are that fidelity, so that you don't bypass the constitution, you don't bypass laws. When you say we are a country of rule of law, as the constitution says, and separation of powers, and human rights, and all those things, check and balances, rule by institutions, through institutions, that happens. I think if we dedicated ourselves to implementing the constitution as is, that would be a major breakthrough. And yes, this government is government for about 2 years now. Sometimes governments, when they're beginning, have hiccups and all that kind of stuff. But it is absolutely essential, from where I sit and sometimes from where I stand, it's absolutely essential that we are faithful to the Constitution, to that charter. And there's a shortfall in terms of us as leadership, as a society, implementing, that constitution. I believe that corruption must be tackled frontally, because we can't afford corruption, particularly in the levels that we hear and we can see and we know continues to happen. That is something, and even, top leadership, the EACC itself, the media, everybody can see and says that corruption is an issue. So if it is an issue, then we must deal with it squarely, including citizens, like saying, I'm not going to be bribed during the election season. I'm going to choose leaders without this pressure. Because corruption is not just about the top leaders. Actually, the way it is, even young people saying that, some of the young people, I don't mind how I get my money, I just want money. So it is unfortunately a disease that is beginning to be present in the body of the entire society, and that's dangerous levels. So, you know, I was, for example, you know, asking, when we have these wealth declarations, why do we make them still private? Why can't we, you know, by leaders or people in government, why can't we say that, you know, this should be made public?
Yeah.
If I want to stand in a position, like before, when I was saying, you know, maybe I can be a presidential candidate, why should there be a life audit? You know, so that I can demonstrate anything that I have, how did I have it? How did I get it? And with my spouse, how did we get it? These corruption cases, and we are lawyers, both of us.
Yes.
Why can't they have a time frame, like the presidential petition? The presidential petition has got a fixed time. Yes. Of course, they are saying that it should have slightly more days so that the people are more thorough.
Yeah.
And I think that's a reasonable thing to, you know, think about. From the start, you know, to the end, we give it this particular period, and there's no saying that, you know, we want a conservatory order or we want whatever it is. Why can't we?
Just like what happens now in the small claims that you must adjudicate within
a particular period.
Yes.
Why can't we say that? Why can't we do this open procurement? Why can't we say that in most of the procurement, public procurement, we are going to do open, you know, procurement? That happens in some countries. It was happening in a small county. You know, why can't we do that? Because if I come into the public space, it is because I want to serve the public. If I want to serve myself, I should go into the private sector. I should be a lawyer. You know, in private practice, I should do something else.
True.
You know, so I think.
So if we handle corruption as a country, we will be able to reach to greater destinations as a nation. Precisely,
because if the president says every day 2 billion shillings are wasted, 730 billion shillings also, illicit flows about 380 billion per year. You know, when you look at the Comptroller and Auditor General's reports from 2004 to 2022, about 8.130 something trillion, three equivalent of 3 years budgets is wasted. Now, if 730 billion, that's money for counties for 2 years.
Mheshimiwa, with that, now that we have this wastage, and we are saying if we deal with this aspect of corruption as a nation, and it starts, like you said, from the common mwananchi until up level, that I'm not going to pay the bribe, and neither is this person, and like we said, have time frames to adjudicate or conclude these matters from the judicial aspect, then would it be prudent, because that is one of the allegations Kenyans were putting across when the finance bill passed through, and they were telling the government, wait, there is corruption, there is also wastes in terms of public wastes, or buying umbrellas and things that are not relevant at that time, and foreign travels of people in leadership. And the common mwananchi was saying, we need to stop this because we have real issues. We have the doctors on the streets, and you cannot overtax us. Yet there is wastage in spending. What is your take on that common concern that the Kenyans were raising at that time?
You know, you see, like in a household, you must know your budget, and you must know how much you can spend, and you must, you know how to manage what you have prudently, so that you can last a month, you can last a year. And even with the country, it's the same. you know, this business of borrowing, and even when you ask how is the money that is borrowed used, so that it can be an investment from where we will see value. So those are important questions. Those are questions that, you know, should be asked and should be answered in our countries, on the continent. And like the public debt issue is a big issue, because it's a big issue because we have borrowed significantly, so that we keep on pushing the limits of how much more to borrow. And even when we get another loan to pay for a loan, the time will come when even that other loan...
Yeah, it is a recurrent.
Precisely. Problem. And of course, we will pay even more interest for that particular... So we are postponing the problem, like Ethiopia, like Zambia and Ghana, of debt distress. And that's not a good space. And of course, when you borrow now, it will be paid by future generations. And that makes them not have resources for development during that particular time. So I think it's a question of now saying, how do we manage our country as a going concern? Because a lot of the people who are in leadership are also in private sector. And if you look at the companies that they are run on the whole very prudently, so that they make profits. Even if those leaders are not doing business with government, because some do, but in the private, they know how to run those companies well. So why can those skills be transferred into the public space where they're also actors? You know, you see, those are questions that you know, must be asked, and as citizens, it's important to give satisfactory answers. If the leadership, you see, when you are given responsibility in certain dockets, you must deliver. You know, and if it takes a long time before you deliver, then you need to be replaced. You know, you need to be replaced. And even for these corruption issues, like in Botswana, which keeps on being one of the best performing countries in terms of the Transparency International Index, corruption index. How Botswana began, the prime minister then, even if you're a relative, you get jailed. You're in corruption and you get jailed. And the signal is sent that it's not the small people only that we are looking for. We are looking for everybody who you become corrupt, and we shall deal with you because you're doing a lot of damage to the country. You're not patriotic. You know, in Korea, they even put the leader, the lady president or prime minister, they jailed her because they are serious. When you do certain things, the country will not. Of course, in China, they are even more drastic. They shoot you when you, they execute you when you get involved in corruption. I don't know about what they do abroad, but in their country, you know, they do that. So I think Kenya, Africa cries for transformation. We can't continue doing business as usual.
Parting shot, you're turning 70 very soon. And as ABTV Kenya, we are really wishing you long life, because we still feel there's a lot for you to give this country. The parting shot is just in terms of two questions that now don't deal with your public life that you've done. What is the most memorable moment in your life? The point that you just look back and you say, wow, that was my highlight. I know there are many, but perhaps the one that you cannot forget and you say, wow, this I was the happiest. And of course, with life, it's a coin. What was the most lowest moment of your life as you turn 70?
There are many good moments and there are many not so good moments.
Perhaps you can pick a few.
I think when with my spouse, I had opportunity to look at our first daughter.
Wow.
That was a good moment, and knowing that I'm now a father. That was a great moment. Maybe another great moment was when, as an adult, I studied theology for a master's, and I got a degree. But more so because knowing that that's the end of a course where I said to myself, I want to understand more about God, about faiths. I think also that was a good moment. And moments in Makueni, just sitting with people and discussing anything we want to discuss, and knowing that there is wisdom, there is knowledge to be had from the so-called ordinary people of all classes, from young people to very old people. I think I talked about one of the lowest moments is that day that when I faced myself and said, do you want to continue with alcohol? And again, when I stood, and from the counter assembly of Makueni, shots were happening from people who thought I was an enemy, because I was trying to say we must use money prudently. And one day when people abducted me, took me to Ngong, and fortunately I was not killed. There had been a lot of my family, friends and so on, and taken the message everywhere that I was missing in action.
How was it, that abduction? Because you've just raised it at the tail end of the interview. We are curious now. How was that moment for you and your family? Was it when you were the governor of Makueni when the abduction happened?
No, this was coming from one of the meetings of the pro-democracy situation, and so some people followed me, and I realized I was being followed, and I tried to be faster. And when I got through the gate, then they also got into the gate. And they took our car and their car. And so there was a watchman. So they also put the watchman and myself in the car. My spouse and children also saw from the balcony. They saw all this. And that's something that we have discussed as a family for a long time, how they felt. And, after, embassies being contacted and whoever, those days, then I think somebody decided that they should let us free. Whatever money we had, nobody stole it. Nobody found reason, to steal it. Maybe it wasn't much, and so it was not worth stealing.
Thank you so much, Mheshimiwa, for your time. We've really learned a lot. I'm sure viewers from ABTV, you've learned a lot from Professor Kivutha Kibwana. Like I said, he's a man with humility and has served this country in different portfolios. Please feel free to subscribe and ask questions. We will definitely get back to you and ask the professor to be courteous enough to at least give highlights where you need mentorship. To the youth, you've heard the professor. He became a professor, and the journey to education has not ended, even now as he sits here. You've learned also that he became a lecturer at the age of 23. So there is nothing we cannot achieve under this planet. It's only if you believe in yourself. And as the highlight, he said that the three things that we need to put in mind: one is believe in yourself, work hard, and put God at the center, of course. But most importantly, he said that we need also to work on our finances gradually. There is no quick money and there is no quick riches. Thank you very much, Professor.
And thank you very much. I am very privileged to have been hosted by you, and all the best as you mentor young people, as you do what must be done for a better future for our country.
Thank you very much. Very soon you'll see Professor Kivutha Kibwana and ABTV Kenya alongside the production team of Status Studio going live to actually engage with the youth. Thank you very much.
Asante.
Be blessed.